condition like schizophrenia is a chronic condition, which means that you have to manage it often for the rest of your life when you get diagnosed pretty early on as a teenager,
Sure.
a young adult. So you got to find a way to make your recovery journey and your work sustainable. On the issue on the topic of hobbies, I'll mention two things in the context of, you know, uh, recovery and the arts. A lot of people have misconceptions that medications dull you or that you're less creative because of it. But that hasn't been the case for me. Being on medication, for example, has allowed me to be stable and achieve goals with my best friends of writing music and releasing albums and things of that sort. And it's also a fun way for me, making music to tie into the mental health part of it because it's a way that I kind of make my own story up and find my own voice and make a narrative that empowers me so I don't feel like I've just been, a victim of circumstances outside of my control. So, hobbies are important for me. It's a great way of bonding with people through playing music. And it's also a way of finding my voice in my own journey.
We are back this week with two guests here on a mental health break. Vincent A. Lancey here. I'm joined by Carlos. I'm joined by Kody, and they are described as two people who understand the personal and clinical side of schizophrenia better than anyone else. So if this is something that's meaningful to you or you want to learn more, you couldn't be in a better spot. Again, welcome back to a mental health break. Thank you for taking time out of your day to take a deep breath with us. Remember, you are not alone. Our two guests are going to remind us of just that. So, Carlos, Kody, thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Well, I'm really excited to get this episode out there because of your courage it's taking to share some of these stories. Carlos and I just had a chance to chat a bit backstage, get to know each other, also in Florida right now. But he touched on having a second chance at life, a second lease on life after hearing my story. Carlos, I'd love to ask you, please share what you can about that experience.
Sure. Well, Vincent, I grew up in a good middle class home. I was a good student. I had a normal, privileged life by all measures. I went off to college, and as often is the case with serious mental health issues, the onset is late adolescence, young adulthood. And by my senior year of college, I was experiencing florid psychosis. I was hearing voices, I was having disorganized thoughts, believing there were special messages out there for me. Fortunately, I had a family friend who talked to my mom, and my mom was able to meet with my academic advisor, and we were able to begin the process of having an honest conversation about my mental health challenges in college. It still took a number of months before I got the right diagnosis, but even during that period where the diagnosis was delayed, I was getting progressively unwell, and I think it could have easily ended up in a different path in life. I could have easily ended up in the jail system. I could have easily ended up homelessness. But fortunately, I had family and friends advocating for me when I was my most vulnerable to get the care I needed. And it does feel, like you said, like I have a second shot at life. And with that, I have an immense gratitude. I try not to take anything for granted. And I'm driven by a profound sense of purpose to try to pay it forward and help others on a similar journey.
Well, congratulations on how far you've come. I'm typing up as the show notes go on here. You're not getting the right diagnosis. It's really saddening to hear how guests come on this show and they say that, where you put your trust in someone. And of course, doctors are human, people are human, but I understand as a patient what that must feel like to feel like, oh, again, here we go again, here we go again. So again, congratulations how far you've come. Kody, I know you have a very powerful story as well. Please share your story starting from wherever you feel most comfortable.
Yeah, of course. So, my journey with mental illness and schizophrenia actually didn't start with me. It started with my mom.
Okay.
My mom has schizoaffective disorder. So when I was a teenager, I became a full-time caregiver for my mom. She had went from working three jobs as a single mom to not being able to take care of herself anymore. And it was a very long journey for her. She also went through several incorrect diagnoses, a lot of medication that she shouldn't have been on. And it wasn't until just before I went off to college that we got her a proper diagnosis and got her stable. So we were able to get her a little more stable. I felt comfortable enough to go off to college. And just like Carlos, college is where I suffered my psychotic break. Unlike Carlos, I wasn't able to get help quite as efficiently and quickly. And so I did end up falling into addiction, and then going through the jail system, which is unfortunately very common for people with schizophrenia and mental illness. And so I joined those statistics. And then once I got out of jail, I was finally able to get a proper diagnosis, get treatment, and I started telling stories about my life with schizophrenia online. And I was able to build a following of over 1 million people on TikTok, over 100,000 on YouTube, and over 300,000 now on Instagram, just from sharing my story with schizophrenia and then talking about what it's like living day to day with it. That also gave me the ability to join in as the host of the Unseen and Unheard podcast, which is where me and Carlos really got to have a great conversation about setting goals and kind of rebuilding your new life.
Well, congratulations to you as well and how far you've come. I'd love to delve deeper in each of your journeys. When was that first moment where you decided to share your story? What was that push in the direction where you realized, hey, there's more people out there that went through something like this. I want to make a difference.
You know,
Oh, go ahead, Carlos.
Thank you, Kody. I'll be brief. I think when you first get diagnosed, it's really easy to feel like all hope is lost, especially during the first episode of a psychosis, and you feel alone, you feel isolated. Fortunately, for me, I had people around me by reaching out to support groups through NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and other resources that saw in me what I wasn't able to see in myself yet. I didn't see an opportunity for recovery. I didn't see an opportunity to get back on track, to go back to school, work, date, all the things that normal people, want in life.
Right.
But, so it was other people that encouraged me to share my story and be brave about it. And for that, I'm grateful.
Thank you for sharing that. And how about you?
Yeah, very similar for me. When I was first diagnosed, I live in a very rural area, so I felt very alone in my diagnosis, and advocacy and using social media to share my story was just a way for me to try to not only feel less alone in my journey, but help others who might be feeling the same way. One of the issues I had with stories about mental illness and the news and media was they were always trying to make it seem like people with mental illness were inherently dangerous, especially with disorders like schizophrenia. And so, after one of the many tragedies that we've had in this country, I felt the need to make videos so that people could see what schizophrenia actually looks like and what it actually looks like living with mental illness, and how I wasn't a danger to anyone. If anything, I was terrified, I was confused, and I just wanted people to be able to better understand my point of view.
Thank you for sharing that, both of you. And that's part of the problem with the internet, the digital era, this information era, where there's so much information out there, but the wrong information is 99% of it. That's one of my many goals with this podcast, keeping guests come on to deliver that correct information. Would you agree with that, where there's just a ton of, as you're saying, false narratives on mental health?
Yeah, so I know, because my primary job is social media, I see a lot of the misconceptions that are out there. One of them being that people with schizophrenia are inherently dangerous. A lot of people still confuse schizophrenia with DID, or dissociative identity disorder. And then I also hear very commonly people assume that individuals with schizophrenia can't live full functional lives, even with treatment and medication. I get a lot of people on my social media who assume that because I'm functioning day to day and I have symptoms a lot less than I used to, that I couldn't possibly have schizophrenia. I must be faking it because I'm a functioning person with schizophrenia. So there's a lot of misconceptions out there, and people like Carlos and all mental health advocates, including you, Vincent, are working towards helping people better understand that those things aren't the case.
Very well said. Carlos, you have anything to add to that?
No, that's absolutely right on, Kody. I think, schizophrenia remains and psychosis remain some of the most misunderstood and stigmatized illnesses we have in our society. Yet we know what the antidote is to cure stigma, and it's quite simple. It's storytelling. So our work as advocates, sharing our story, and Kody's work, having a reach of millions of people through social media. It's all about helping change the narrative and combat the misperceptions and misinformation that there is out there regarding the condition.
Very well said. Oh, I look forward to staying connected now with both of you, seeing you both continue to share your story on your platforms. We spoke a lot about your story so far. I now want to help a little more of the masses here, as I always highlight what works for some does not work for everyone. There are lots of ways to take care of your mental health. What are some ways either of you do? What are some things, excuse me, that you do to stay above, stay afloat, keep pushing?
Yeah, well, I'm only going to speak from my lived experience, but I can also talk a little bit about my role as a clinician caring for other people with mental health conditions. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner by training, but mostly for me, the important thing is sticking with medication. That's kind of the foundation of my treatment. What I like to say to people is medication is necessary, but it's also not enough, and it takes more than that. It also could take the form of therapy, peer support, advocacy, supportive work and education. All these other tools are necessary to build a life in recovery once you've been stable and you found the right medication, the right provider that you can work with to manage your condition.
Very well said. And I think some people think, or not some, there are people, excuse me, who may think, oh, medicine, that's it, done. People go to the gym, they think just exercise is up. No, you also have to diet. You also have to sleep. You also have to stay hydrated. Very great point there. Thank you for sharing. Kody, stage is yours.
Obviously I'd like to echo what Carlos said too. All of those things are crucial. For me, I find that I also have to work on taking time for myself, focusing on self-care. And that means for me, focusing on hobbies, things outside of my advocacy and work. As much as I love to do what I do, mental health advocates in general, I think, have a tendency to take on too much because we see all of the issues that are out there and we want to fix all of them. And that's an amazing mission, but it's also, it can be incredibly difficult and it can be incredibly overwhelming and taxing. So I try to do more self-care recently in the last few years, just as a way to be able to maintain my storytelling. There's that, saying that you can't pour from an empty cup, and I'm not going to be able to help others if I'm not in a position to help myself. And so one of the ways that I, focus on my own self-care is just trying to get back into hobbies, trying to maintain social life, trying not to isolate all of those really important things that I think help with cognitive functioning and also help with me being able to be the best advocate I can.
Another amazing answer here where you can't be a best friend to others if you're not a best friend to yourself. And I learned that too a few years ago, where you can't give when you have nothing to give. You have to take time to stop. As an entrepreneur, I used to, and I still could work all day, every day because I love to do my work, just like you both said. But you have to find time to take a mental health day. I take my mental health breaks. I often make this joke where my mental health day during football season is on Sundays, but the Jets historically have not been good for my mental health. They've usually lost or lost big or let me down. The off season's our best season every year. It doesn't fail. So hopefully this year we can stay healthy. But this isn't a football podcast. This is a mental health podcast. But we did talk about hobbies. Is it okay to put your hobbies on hold to start a business? Because in my opinion, it's not, because I found myself getting lonely, more overwhelmed, and finding myself losing the feeling of joy with achievements, where I would start to achieve more things, publish another book, do something else, and it's just back to the next. I'm back in the grind. I'm back at work. Should people take, like you're saying, more intentional time for hobbies, even in the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to have all of these goals and ambitions. And I, have talked a lot with Carlos about setting goals. And we talked about starting with small goals and really working your way up to these really big, ambitious goals that we all have now. And I think you can only do that if you're able to also be taking care of yourself. Everyone, I think, starts. I did the same thing when I started on social media. I was posting 4 or 5 times a day. And as amazing as that was, that people got to connect with me and like see my journey a little bit more, it was way too much for me. And I'm not able to effectively share what I'm going through if I'm not in a position where I'm doing well or functional. So I think all of those ambitions are great, but it needs to be something you do with self-care and with yourself in mind.
Great answer there. Don't let yourself down. Don't neglect the hobby or two. How about you, Carlos? What's on your mind?
Yeah, it's a condition like schizophrenia is a chronic condition, which means that you have to manage it often for the rest of your life when you get diagnosed pretty early on as a teenager,
Sure.
a young adult. So you got to find a way to make your recovery journey and your work sustainable. On the issue on the topic of hobbies, I'll mention two things in the context of, you know, uh, recovery and the arts. A lot of people have misconceptions that medications dull you or that you're less creative because of it. But that hasn't been the case for me. Being on medication, for example, has allowed me to be stable and achieve goals with my best friends of writing music and releasing albums and things of that sort. And it's also a fun way for me, making music to tie into the mental health part of it because it's a way that I kind of make my own story up and find my own voice and make a narrative that empowers me so I don't feel like I've just been, a victim of circumstances outside of my control. So, hobbies are important for me. It's a great way of bonding with people through playing music, and it's also a way of finding my voice in my own journey.
Do you find yourself in the music realm being in a meditative state once you start playing for a little bit? Do you find yourself to just be leaving the problems behind? Because that's how I get in the gym. And I started reading about this meditative state where some people, the act of meditation is challenging, and it always has been for me too over time. But getting in that state, whether it's the gym or something, does that resonate with you with music?
Oh yeah, sometimes it feels like an altered state, like a flow state when you're really in a good jam session. It's also probably one of the best exercises for the brain, and we know how
Yeah.
important it is to exercise your brain. It's, the brain is neuroplastic when it's gone through an injury, whether it's through psychosis or a traumatic brain injury. It has the capacity to heal itself if you exercise it like you would exercise muscles in the gym. So all that is very important for recovery. Yeah.
Great answer. I could certainly relate. I started writing books. My brain went into overdrive. I remember the first time after about 6 years, I didn't have to write something on a post-it note and I remembered it. My brain was so accustomed to writing on a post-it note, writing on my calendar because I anticipated my brain would forget it. Writing my first book, Left for Dead, brain's going, going, going. All of a sudden, my memory's back. But after 6 years, thanks for all that and sharing that answer. Kody, what's on your mind for this?
I think for me, I've had a lot of luck with keeping a little more ability to have cognitive functioning when I'm doing things that are active. So, unlike what Carlos said, where you're really engaging your brain, I tend to do that too much. So, for me, I find that I'm actually able to be a little more cognitive if I'm taking time away from these activities that are more engaging to my brain and stepping outside, walking with the dogs, going on a hike. All of these things I found just give me a little bit of clarity and allow me to, when I get back to working on something that does require a lot more cognitive functioning, I'm able to focus on that.
I love the walks too to break up my day. I do these intentional screen breaks because as a writer and a podcast, I'm just on the computer all the time. Go outside, don't have music on, take in the natural noises and the sunlight. A great tip that was given to me on this show. But before we get your contact info and we sign off, I'd love to just open the stage one more time on the topic of schizophrenia, on the work that you're doing. If there's anything we didn't touch on yet, I want to make sure I give you the opportunity to do so.
I think Carlos also brought up the National Alliance for Mental Illness, and I want to make sure we emphasize that as a resource. That is also where I got started with peer support and what led to me doing social media advocacy. So I can't say enough good things about NAMI. I also want to remind people about the Hope for Schizophrenia website. That's where the podcast, the Unseen and Unheard podcast lives, as well as a lot of other really great mental health resources and schizophrenia resources. Those are both really great resources, but keep in mind that there are also a lot of content creators with mental illness that are making really great content to help you better understand how they function day to day. Everyone's journey is different, everyone's brain chemistry is different, but peer support and finding content creators with similar illnesses is really what helped me realize I wasn't alone and give me the inspiration to start doing social media and advocacy.
I love that. And I think that you're going to continue to inspire so many people, the both of you. You mentioned your website. Where can people say hello to you if they want to say hello to each of you online?
If you want to go first, Carlos.
Sure, you can visit my website, Carlos, and then my last name, LARRAURI.com.
All right, Kody.
And for me, you can find my website, kodygreen.com, or you can find me on social media at Schizophrenic Hippie on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube.
Thank you for sharing that, boys, and thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show, spending a great afternoon. After a long morning, I was looking forward to this. Usually there's a few pods a day, and this one is my only one, so I was really hyped up about it. Thanks for taking some time and helping everyone remember they are not alone. The show is at A Mental Health Break on all podcast platforms. Find us on social media, mentalhealthbreak.com. We're there to help you on your journey. And with that, we are signing off today from one side of Florida to the other and then across the country. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.